1, 2, 3. Good evening and welcome to Daily News Simplified. Before we begin our session, there is a small piece of information for you that we have compiled our Daily News Simplified MCQ compilation, and you can attempt it on our eLearn platform. The website for which is elearn.rausias.com. The advantage for this is that you can assess yourself first, and then second, you can get your real time marks score with respect to your preparedness of current affairs exam. So without further delay, now let us begin our session. The agenda for the day is, with respect to your mains examination, we have taken articles. The first one being in the context of World Inequality Lab report, and the second article is with respect to integration of Central Armed Police Forces. From the standpoint of your prelims examination, there were 6 articles that we could identify. Those were first with respect to Antarctic Treaty, second with respect to the jurisdiction of International Court of Justice, third being the Irrawaddy River, which was in news. Then the last 3 were with respect to Virupaksha Temple, AI agents, and central public sector enterprises. So without further delay, let us begin the agenda for today with the first article. The first article is inspired by 2 news that appeared first in Indian Express and then again in Business Line. The context of the news is that the World Inequality Lab, it has suggested a 2% tax on the ultra wealthy Indians, right? So how do we map the syllabus with respect to this news? The syllabus says in your GS paper 2, it says issues relating to poverty and development. And in the past, poverty has been a persistent theme of UPSC when it comes to your GS paper 2 as well as GS paper 3. And in I think 2020, there was a question that hunger and poverty are the biggest challenges for the good governance in India till today. Evaluate how far the successive governments have progressed in dealing with these humongous problems and suggest measures for improvement. So we will be seeing this article with respect to the suggestions and measures for improvement, right? So let us understand what are the various aspects that are associated with the concept of equality and inequality. So before beginning this, let us understand about the institution which has published this report. This institution, that is World Inequality Lab, is located in Paris, and the people who are concerned with this institution which published this report are famous economists like Thomas Piketty, who is also called as modern Marx, right? And then in the context of this particular report for India, they have said that unfortunately India has gone from British Raj to billionaire Raj. So this is an unfortunate remark that they have made with respect to India. Now, what are the key findings associated with this particular report? They have said that inequality in India was at very low level after the independence. For instance, the top 1% of the people, they had 11% of the wealth. Moving on, because the governments in the initial phase were inspired by the socialistic principles of development, this rate further decreased, and in the mid-80s, the top 1% of the population has resources equivalent to 6% of the national resources. However, there was a landmark development in the 90s that is called as LPG reforms. And after these reforms, the percentage dramatically increased. And as of now, we can safely say that 1%, top 1% of the Indians have access to 40% of the wealth in this country. So this information is startling as well as unfortunate. And Another observation that they have made is that India is the second most unequal country in the world when it comes to the major countries. The first one being South Africa. So this is the status, and just before the LPG reforms, there was just one billionaire in India, and after the LPG reforms, as of now, we have 160 plus billionaires in India. Now, let us understand what are the various dimensions of inequality. The dimensions of inequality are not just in the context of wealth distribution. The other aspects of inequality faced are gender. Right. For example, in various surveys conducted by the private institutions, it has been said and observed that females face various kind of discriminations. For example, like job ceiling, right? When it comes to promotion, then there are issues with respect to caste-based discrimination. For example, it was observed that more than 90% of the people who are employed, more than 95% of the people who were employed as manual scavengers came from scheduled caste categories. Then there have been observations, and if you have been following DNS for quite some time, you will understand that Sachar committee has consistently, various committees like Sachar committee have made consistent remarks that there are inequalities within the religion as well, and Muslim community and other minor face certain kind of inequalities when it comes to the inequality faced by the communities. Then there are gaps with respect to region, right? For example, if we talk about the COVID preparedness, only 10% of the students in Bihar were able to get digital access to education, whereas this percentage was close to 90% in the state of Kerala, right? So these are the factors of inequality apart from wealth inequality. Similarly, age. For example, old age people, more than 75% of the people in the old age have been found to be living in the below poverty line category. So this is the unfortunate situation when it comes to inequality in India. Now, what are the reasons for rising inequality? The first one being, as observed by the World Inequality Report, is LPG reforms. So while the reforms were essential, but they were not carried out in an efficient and justiciable manner. So these reforms have unfortunately created kind of great divide when it comes to the top 1% and the rest of the population, and the redistribution could not be taken up in a agreeable manner. Next, then there are issues with respect to gaps in taxation, right? For example, wealth tax, which was there, was abolished by the government in 2016. Then there are loopholes in the income tax code of India, with the help of which the rich are able to evade the taxes. Then there are reasons with respect to lower expenditure on the social sector. Most of the developed countries have a fair percentage of GDP that is spent on the education, healthcare, and nutrition sector, right? But unfortunately, when it comes to India, it hovers around 3 to 4%, even lesser than that at many instances, right? Whereas the desirable expenditure is close to 6%. Then there are issues with respect to ascriptive identities. Again, we can take the example of the previous example that we took with respect to caste inequalities associated with caste identities associated with various kind of jobs. For example, manual scavengers generally come from scheduled caste categories. And then there are issues with respect to first criminalization of politics, and then there are issues with respect to crony capitalism in general. Now let us move on and discuss what have been the steps that have been taken and what is the way forward, because when you'll be appearing in your mains examination, the answer would have to hover around these two aspects rather than identifying the problem. You'll have to answer in the context of what have been the steps taken so far and what is the way forward. So the steps that have been taken are, with respect to housing, we have Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. With respect to water, we have Jal Jeevan Mission and sanitation. So basic necessities have been taken care of, but the question arises with respect to the efficiency with which these schemes have been implemented. Again, one of the another basic parameter is with respect to development and redistribution is electricity and financial inclusion, which have also been taken very well taken care of. And there have been various government schemes, for example a scheme of Kiran and Curie scheme for the educational improvement in the weaker sections of the society. And then for health, we have Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana and Janani Suraksha Yojana. And lastly, we have recently also introduced a bill to reserve 33% of the seats for women in the parliament. So these are the steps that have already been taken. But now what is the way forward? From the context of the report only talks about two measures. The first one being taxing the ultra wealthy and then using that tax and redistributing it to the poor and middle class. But we will take it in a comprehensive manner and suggest some further measures. For example, the measure can be restructuring of tax code so that tax can be collected in a more efficient and middle class friendly manner. Again, since this wealth tax was abolished, it can be brought back in. Then second is with respect to increased public sector investment in healthcare and education. Obviously these investments are called as enablers. Without the enabling that can be provided with respect to your education and healthcare, population cannot grow and bloom, right? Then there are issues with respect to effective implementation of policies. Whatever leaks and gaps are there with respect to implementation of policies, those should be taken care of. Then there is a concept of universal basic income, which has been a kind of idea to provide universal basic income to all the people. The first criteria is with respect to provision for UBI for all the people. Again, there can be some classification based on the poverty and so on, and some kind of certain social security income can be provided, right? This is again the recommendation from the Inequality Lab report. Even the Economic Survey of India 2021 has asked for creation of an ethical implementation of an ethical wealth creation. See, the problem with free market per se is that it is free, right? So there is a free hand, right? So as per Adam Smith, what did he used to say? That let the market be free, right? But the free hand becomes a selfish hand, whereas the government's hand or the state's hand becomes a guided hand. So there should be a golden handshake between the free hand of the market and the trustworthy or guiding hand of the state, so that there is a wealth creation. We need wealth. We are not saying that we don't need wealth. We are not going to go on the path of various failed socialist economies, right? But we need a guidance from the state in the ethical wealth creation by the state. Lastly, there needs to be investment in the skill development, and entrepreneurship is the way forward. And we need to invest further in the women education and bringing women to the workforce. As per a study, we all if you could remember, we did one session when we compared the parameters of India with the parameters of Japan with respect to women in their economy, right? We took examples of care economy, right, where Japan after Abenomics invested heavily in bringing women to the main fold of economics, especially in the sectors such as care economy, which has increased the GDP of Japan in a substantial manner. Similarly, there are evidences and observations which suggest that if women come to the labor force in equivalent proportion to males, our economy has the potential to grow by even 27%, right? So these are the way forwards. For further details with respect to these points, you can always refer to the notes that are being provided along with this lecture. Moving on to the next main topic, the topic that was taken is inspired by a report that was published on the Hindu newspaper, page number 8. What is the context of the news? Our NSA, Shri Ajit Dobal, he recently participated in one of the investiture ceremonies with respect to BSF officers, and there he remarked that the undefined borders are adversely affecting our country. Along with it, there is an associated news. Again, the context was the same. In that particular ceremony, he also suggested that integration of CAPFs will save money and bring homogeneity in the seven Central Armed Police Forces. What is the syllabus mapping with respect to this article? Your GS paper 3 syllabus. From the part of internal security, it says that security forces and agencies, various security forces and the agencies and their mandate is a part of your syllabus. And in the past 2020, there has been a previous year question. The question was, analyze internal security threats and trans-border crimes along Myanmar, Bangladesh and Pakistan borders. So the paper setter is asking you to analyze what are the internal security threats from the trans-border crimes along these three borders. First, Myanmar and Bangladesh, and then second is Western Front, that is Pakistan, including line of control. Also discuss the role played by various security forces in this regard. So obviously, the role with respect to various security forces can always be asked in one form or the other. For example, they can ask you with respect to border security force. They can ask you or frame a question with respect to, let us say, Assam rifles, right? So on and forth. So we will understand this particular article in the context of, first, what are the issues with respect to undefined borders which are adversely affecting our country, and then what can be what would be the advantage when we do integration of CAPFs, right? So the first one is that challenges associated with the border security, right? So the first problem with respect to this is undefined borders. So as you might be aware of, the recent skirmishes at the LAC were with respect to undefined borders. The perception with respect to the boundaries when it comes to India and China, especially in the Ladakh sector, is that they are not agreeing to our definition of standard borders, and we are not agreeing to their definition of standard borders. And obviously, with the states like China, which are our neighbor, there is going to be a constant apprehension in the minds of both the policymakers from both the sides, right? Then these borders need to be defined, right? Then there are issues with respect to role of directly state actors. For example, in the Western Front, there are state sponsored activities with respect to infiltration, with respect to your various psychotropic substances, illicit trade, right? So on and forth. Then the problem from the aspect of our eastern borders are just the opposite. There are no issues with respect to state sponsorship, but there are issues with respect to illegal immigration. For example, recently 2-3 years back, in the context of Rohingya crisis, there were apprehensions with respect to large scale influx of Rohingyas from the Bangladeshi borders towards Indian borders. Then there are issues with respect to infrastructural deficiencies. The borders with the states like Myanmar and Bangladesh, although they are well defined, but the problem is with respect to border management. The border management in this context has been very poor when it comes to infrastructure, right? and then nefarious elements easily can cross these borders, because manning is also not that good, and the border infrastructure with respect to wiring and everything is also not that good. Now, what are the implications of weak border security? The first one being the economic strain on the resources. Because see, one you can take the example of 1971 war. One of the aspect because of which India got involved in the 1971 war was because of the large scale influx of citizens of Bangladesh, which were trying to save their lives. So one of the parameters because of which government started intervention was to stop the uh, economic strain on the resources, because even we are having a limitation that has been put upon, right? So we cannot have any kind of economic strain on our resources. Next is with respect to commerce and trade, right? Again, there are various theories which suggest that free border and free trade, again, it leads to further development of the areas. But here in our context, the western border, because of the militancy and terrorism, we are unable to carry out free commerce and trade. And generally it is observed that the people who live nearby the borders, they are dependent heavily on trade, right? So the communities which are living around the borders, right, they suffer the most. Then there are issues with respect to displacement of locals, because of the ongoing these kind of insurgencies and these kind of activities. Locals have to be displaced and moved to various safer positions or safe zones, right? So this also leads to uprootment of their lives and their homes. Then there are issues with respect to local governance, and again recently there was an initiative in the state of Punjab, Assam, and West Bengal. The jurisdiction of border security force, which was up to 15 kilometers, was increased to 50 kilometers. Because why? The These kind of elements, they develop a kind of deeper interlinkages, and because agencies need to trace them, they have to go deeper into the mainland, right? So for this purpose, this jurisdiction of border security force was increased from 15 kilometers from the border to 50 kilometers. However, this kind of arrangement also creates a kind of administrative and political turmoil. Again, the government of West Bengal alleged that you are because policing is a state subject, you are infringing. That is, border security force is a central agency. Central agency is infringing upon the uh, authority or the domain of the state agency, right? So these kind of issues also create political crisis. Then there are issues with respect to bilateral trade. There was a point of time that we had our good relations with Myanmar, but because of the activities that were carried out by the terrorist group that were present in the Myanmar, who used to come to India and attack our security forces and then go and flee back to Myanmar. Again, these kind of activities created a kind of impact on the bilateral relations when it comes to India and Myanmar. So these are the issues. Now let us come to suggestions and way forward. So first aspect is with respect to, you cannot keep blaming the neighbor that yes, this neighbor is creating a kind of problem into my home. You better be safe by yourself. So first is that we need to be better prepared with respect to border management, providing thermal cameras and other gadgets to the security forces. There have been talks with respect to smart fencing, but these talks have not materialized, and only limited sections or limited sectors of the borders in the eastern part of India have been put under smart fencing. Otherwise, the large swaths of the land, which there are borders with even Myanmar and Bangladesh, which they have not been put under the smart fencing. Then we need to invest upon integrated border management systems with the help of data analytics and AI. Again, this can only be possible with the help of smart fencing and provision of thermal cameras. Then there are suggestions, even these suggestions have come from the NSA itself, that we need to befriend the border population. Again, befriending the border population has always helped us, because even people living in the border areas, they trust the Indian agencies more than anyone else, right? Then in this specific context, here comes the integration of central armed police forces. As you might be knowing that an integration exercise is already going on in the military forces, and they are going to create a unified command, right? So on similar lines, NSC has proposed an integration of CAPFs as well. As of now, there are 7 central armed police forces in India, but the problem here is that all these central armed police forces have their separate domain of protocols, separate equipments on which they operate, right? Separate various kind of duties and protocols assigned to them as per the requirement of specific requirement of the service. But now, since NSA has argued that the provisions that were provided back then were in the context of the demands of those times, but now the times have changed, and we need homogeneity more than differentiation. So what we need is that we need homogeneity in deployment. For example, let us say we need border security force in the let us say eastern front, right? But our more than enough number of border security force is deployed on the western front as of now. What will we do then, right? So here in this context, NSA argues that your CAPFs like uh, Assam Rifles, right, ITBP, so on and forth, they should also be ready with when it comes to mobilization to the eastern front, right? So border security forces should not be confined to the borders of Bangladesh and Pakistan, but they should also have a training with respect to high altitude warfare, which is a specialization of ITBP, right? So this will lead to operational consistency. Then there are recommendations with respect to standardization of training. That's one standard training and sub courses should be provided to all the CAPFs. Then equipments. Again, equipments ka the problem is that there is a disparity when it comes to the provision for equipments for various central armed police forces. On one end, some agencies are operating specialized equipments, Israeli and American carbines. However, the other agencies, like right, who are fighting Maoists, are given not so good weapons, and then this will further lead to better communication devices and better communication in between the various forces. And lastly, it would be cost effective as well. So these will be the advantages when it comes to integration of central armed police forces as suggested by the NSA, right? Then the other two recommendations are in the context of increased cooperation and coordination with neighbors as much as possible, and to as many neighbors as possible. For example, we have good relations, or at least neutral relations, with Myanmar as of now, and then we have cordial relations with Bangladesh, right? So these relations should be utilized so that these kind of activities like infiltration are not conducted from the soils. And then further is development of border areas. Various schemes for the development of border areas need to be further consolidated, and border infrastructure must also be developed along with human and social infrastructure, right? So this is all with respect to the mains articles that we took today. Now we will be moving towards the MCQs, right? So the first MCQ that we have taken is in the context of Antarctic Treaty. The news appeared on page number 6 of the Hindu newspaper. What was the context of the news? That delegates from 60 countries are arriving in Kochi to attend 46th Antarctic Treaty consultative meeting. Now, what are the key facts associated with this particular meeting? The key facts are, in this particular meeting, India is going to propose a regulatory framework for tourism. Right. For example, in Antarctica, because of the extreme weather, in the past there used to be very less number of tourists. However, even though the inequality in the world over is rising, but the number of ultra rich and wealthy people are increasing worldwide. So now what do you do when you have enough cash to burn? You go on an adventure, right? So more and more people are opting towards going to remotest places of the world, and one of those places is Antarctic. So tourism in Antarctica is increasing day by day, and in order to regulate that tourism, they are going to organize a meeting. So the organizer is going to be National Center for Polar Research and Polar and Ocean Research. And you please tell me in the comment section, where is it located? Now, what are the various members? Who all are the various members of Antarctic Treaty? There are 56 members in Antarctica Treaty. What was the objective of signing of this particular treaty? To facilitate what are going to be various laws with respect to logistics, governance, and tourism in the remotest lands of the earth, such as Antarctica. And this again, we have taken this point because UPSC constantly keeps on asking. This is the first meeting of such kind that has been organized by India. Statements like that they have framed in the past as well in your MCQs. So the note says that India had hosted this last ATCM in New Delhi in 2017. So this is not the first time that we are conducting the Antarctic Treaty consultative meeting, right? And the agenda of this particular consultative meeting is to regulate the number of tourists who are reaching Antarctica. Now let us understand about what is Antarctica Treaty, right? So here, what all constitutes Antarctica? Right. So this is our Earth. So all the land and ice shelves south of the 60-degree latitude, right, is termed as both land and ice shelves, right, is termed as Antarctic. It is a part of our global commons. What are the other global commons? For example, open seas are global commons. Even the North Pole, right, that is part of global commons. And this treaty was initially signed by 12 countries in 1959, and this came into effect in 1961. What are the key principles associated with this treaty? What did these initial 12 parties agreed upon? They agreed upon that Antarctica is going to be used only for peaceful purposes. What do you mean by peaceful purposes? For example, peaceful purpose could include science and technology, research, development, so on and forth. And nobody is going to claim a sovereignty over the Antarctica. And most importantly, no country is going to test nuclear weapons in this area. Now let us understand what has been our relationship with this particular treaty. So this treaty, again remember, was initially signed by 12 countries in 1959. However, India signed this treaty in 1983, right? Almost 22 years later. Next, India has also ratified a convention on conservation of Antarctic maritime marine living resources in 1985, right? So we have constantly approved of that these global commons remain pollution free, remain dispute free, right? So on and forth. Then next we signed environmental protection to the Antarctic Treaty in 1998, which is called as Madrid Protocol. We have been a signatory to this treaty as well. As of now, we operate two research stations in Antarctica, first being Maitri and the second one is Bharti. One station has been decommissioned. And in 2022, this is again a recent development, India enacted the India Antarctica Act. And through this act, we reaffirmed our commitment to the Antarctic Treaty. And then we reaffirmed that yes, we are going to use these areas, but for peaceful and research purposes, right? Based on the information that we have just learned, in past 2014 there was a question on Arctic Council. Similarly, there can be a question on our Antarctic Treaty consultative meeting, or there can be a question on Antarctic Treaty independently, or there can be a question on this particular meeting as well, right? So let us try to solve this MCQ. With reference to Antarctic Treaty, consider the following statements. India is a member of this treaty since its inception. Antarctica should be used only for peaceful purposes. Yes, this statement appears to be right. Okay. Antarctica does not host any tourists due to its extreme climate. So the first statement is that India is a member of this treaty since its inception. Did we read something like this? This treaty came into being in 1961. India signed it in 1983. So statement 1 is incorrect. Statement 2 says Antarctica should be used only for peaceful purposes. Yes, peaceful and scientific purposes that should be used for. Yes, this statement is correct. Antarctica does not host any tourists due to extreme climate. No, this statement is again incorrect, because the very context of holding this meeting is to regulate the number of tourists going to Antarctica, so that there is sustainable tourism over there and the resources are not exploited and wasted, right? So how many of the statements are correct? Only one is correct. That is statement 2 is correct. Okay. Moving on to the next topic, that is International Court of Justice. What is the context of this news? ICJ, that is International Court of Justice, has ordered Israel to halt Rafah offensive. So Rafah is the name of a city that is in the located at the tip end of Gaza Strip. Now, in this ongoing war, Israel has committed itself that they are going to obliterate Rafah as well. But recently, International Court of Justice has ordered the Israeli forces to end the offensive that they are carrying out at Rafah. So in this context, what is important for us? Our important thing is International Court of Justice, because it is a UN agency, and along with it, international institutions are again part of your current affairs when it comes to your preliminary examination. Now let us understand key things about the International Court of Justice. So it is a principal judicial organ of United Nations. For example, United Nations has various organs for various purposes. If we take an example of healthcare, World Health Organization is one of the organizations that is a principal organ of United Nations when it comes to healthcare. Similarly, when it comes to justice, ICJ is the principal organ of United Nations. Then it was established in 1945 by a United Nations Charter. Where is it located? It is located at the Peace Palace in Hague. That is in Netherlands. What are the official languages? The official languages are French and English. Who all become the members of ICJ? All members of United Nations are also considered as a party, right, to the Statute of International Court of Justice. However, they can also include a non-state based on the United Nations Assembly recommendation on the recommendation of UNSC, right? For example, Gaza Strip is not considered as a state, or it is considered as part of Palestine, which is again not considered as a state, right? So even though it is not considered as a state, but after the consultation mechanism, it must have been included over there, right? Now let us discuss the important functions and powers which are there with respect to the International Court of Justice, right? It functions according to the statute of the International Court of Justice, which is a part of United Nations Charter. It has two primary functions. The first one being to settle whatever there are contentious cases, right, in accordance to international laws. Now these cases are going to be there with respect to one nation or the other, right? And then second is with respect to whenever the United Nations needs an advisory opinion, the court provides advisory opinion to the United Nations. Now you connect it with the Supreme Court of India. Whenever there are issues or contentions with respect to the federal nature. For example, there is a dispute ongoing between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu with respect to sharing of river Kaveri. So obviously they are going to approach the Supreme Court. In the similar manner, for example, we are going to have dispute with Pakistan, let us say. So the consultation mechanism would be the ICJ, right? Second, to give, obviously, whenever the central government is in need of a advice, right, or the president of India is in the need of advice, what does Supreme Court do? It provides the advisory opinion, right? So on the similar grounds, this ICJ also provides advisory opinion to the United Nations and its agencies. One unique thing about this is that you as an individual cannot appear in the ICJ that yes, my rights are being harmed, and yes, I'm going to claim it against I'm going to claim my rights against the state. Similarly, individuals, non-governmental organizations and corporations, they cannot go to the ICJ. Only states can be parties to the International Court of Justice. Their hearings are always conducted in a public manner, and the judgments are binding upon the parties concerned, and there is no further appeal to their judgments, right? What is the number of judges? It is composed of 15 judges who are elected for a term of 9 years by the United Nations General Assembly and United Nations Security Council, and no two judges can be from the same country, right? Now, what are the limitations of ICJ in this context? It does not have the power to initiate proceedings on its own unless two states agree in between themselves and proceed towards the ICJ. ICJ cannot take the case suo motu, right? Which, compared to ICC, that is International Criminal Court can take up the cases suo motu, right? And then again, another limitation is that if a state carries out a sovereign function of certain kind of legislation, which for the ICJ it appears to be shady or kind of unconstitutional, it cannot again go and intervene that yes, we do not find this law of yours, we do not find this law in accordance with the statute of United Nations or UN Charter, so this law is unconstitutional, right? They cannot go on their own. Based on our understanding, let us try to solve this MCQ. In the past, there has been a question on United Nations Conventions against Transnational Organized Crimes, right? So on the similar lines, let us read this question. With reference to the International Court of Justice, consider the following statements. It is the sole principal organ of the United Nations situated outside New York. The judgments which are delivered by the ICJ are final and cannot be appealed. Okay, so yes, this is the sole principal organ of the United Nations which is situated outside New York. Where is it situated? The Hague. Okay, the next is its judgment delivered by the ICJ are final and cannot be appealed. Yes, we just read that the judgments are binding upon the parties concerned and are final in nature. And then the hearing of ICJ are always open to the public. Yes, they are open to the public scrutiny. So based on our reading, all these three statements are correct. So answer is C. The next article is inspired by a cutting in the Hindu that is on, I think this is written wrong. I'll have to recheck what was the page number. But however, let us come to the news. The news reads that Myanmar Janta government, that is the present government regime of Myanmar, has plans for its China-backed mega dam project. So China is on a spree of building dams. What is the purpose? The first one being water and second is electricity, right? So what is the context? Myanmar's government has revived its plan to create a Mitson dam. So this is the name of a particular dam on the river Irrawaddy. However, the challenge with respect to this is that environmental conservationists are alleging that this is going to create a lot of problem with respect to local ecology, and second is that it will be located on Saigang fault line. Again, if you must remember, if the dam is located nearby a fault line, there is going to be always a risk of earthquake, and then when it comes to earthquake, it is going to destroy the nearby infrastructure and create problem for the locals in the long run. Now let us have key understanding with respect to the river Irrawaddy. So you notice here that it originates very near to Arunachal Pradesh. This is the part of Arunachal Pradesh, and here it originates in the Himalayas. So it originates on the confluence of two rivers. The first one here, left one, is Mali, and second one, the right tributary, is Namai. These are the two rivers, and on the confluence of these two rivers, when they meet over here, it is later on named as Irrawaddy River. For our understanding, here it is the enlarged portion of this particular river, and here itself China is planning to create Mitson Dam, that is going to be 6,000 megawatt dam. What is the course that is followed by this particular river? It originates in Himalaya, passes through various regions of Myanmar. It is to be noted that this is not a transboundary river, which means that unlike Brahmaputra, which originates from China, comes to India, and then ends its journey in Bangladesh and Bay of Bengal, but this flows completely through Myanmar only, and then it drains into Andaman Sea. What is the length of this particular river? That is 2170 kilometers. So obviously, because it is not a transboundary river, so it is not going to be that much in length. What are the ecological features? The most important ecological feature of this particular river, because of which it is known, is Irrawaddy dolphins, right? So there are other varieties of dolphins which live in fresh water. You must recollect their names and in which particular rivers they are found. And then again, this river encapsulates important bird areas and forms the crucial habitat to various bird species and bird sanctuaries, right? Moving on, in the past there have been a direct question on Irrawaddy dolphin, and similarly there have been persistently questions based on rivers, right? Not just rivers of India, even rivers of Africa they have asked. So they might ask you about the rivers of South Asia, Southeast Asia, right? So in the detailed notes which are being provided along with this video, we have compiled various other rivers which are there, which are important rivers with respect to Southeast Asia, right? So you please kindly go through those notes as well. Now let us try to solve the practice MCQ with reference to Irrawaddy River. Consider the following statements. It is the longest river of East and Southeast Asia. Now we did not read this information anywhere that it is the longest river of East and Southeast Asia. But however, as per our understanding, we must know and remember that there are various other transboundary rivers. For example, Yellow River of China, maybe you can call it, right? For example, Mekong River is also a transboundary river, right? So these rivers must be longer than this particular Irrawaddy river, and in fact Mekong is much longer, almost 3 times longer than this particular river. Yes, so statement 1 becomes incorrect. It originates in Himalayas and flows southwards in Myanmar. Yes, it originates very near to Arunachal Pradesh border and in the Himalayas, and it flows southwards and drains itself in Andaman Sea. Second statement is correct. Third one being Mitson hydroelectric power project is situated at convergence of Mali and Namai river. Yes, these two are the rivers. When they combine with each other, it takes the shape of Irrawaddy river, right? So on the confluence of these two rivers, China is building a dam in Myanmar. So how many of the statements are correct? Only two. Statement 1 is wrong. Moving on to the third article, this news has been taken up from Indian Express, page number 14. The context of this news is not that much important because one of the pavilions of Virupaksha temple fell down in the recent rains, and then there are restoration efforts with respect to the pavilion of Virupaksha temple. But for us, what becomes important is Virupaksha temple, right? Now, what are the key points that are important with respect to this particular temple and temple complex? The first one being location. Where is it located? Right, so it is located in the Hampi complex, right? Hampi in Vijayanagar, a district of Karnataka. It is located on the bank of Tungabhadra river, right? We have taken an image for you to see that it is located on the bank of Tungabhadra river. It is also called as Pampa river. Now, what is its status? It becomes a part of UNESCO's World Heritage Site complex because Hampi has been accorded UNESCO's World Heritage status, and it is part of that complex. So that makes it also as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Now, who built this temple? Again, this is a factual information that you must remember, that in which time frame or in which timeline it was built, who initiated it, who further contributed it, and who concluded the development of this particular or any particular temple in general. So it was built by Lakkana Danadesha. That was a military general or military commander under the King Dev Raya II, right? Who is this temple dedicated to? The chief deity of this particular temple is Lord Virupaksha or Lord Shiva, right? Now, what is the architectural style with respect to this temple? It is again a key point to remember that it is called as Provida style. So Provida is a blend of, on one side, Vesara, Dravida, and Indo-Islamic, right? So this temple is a mix of these three styles, that is Vesara, Dravida, and Indo-Islamic. We can form various elements of all these styles in this particular temple. So architecture is Provida style. Kindly remember. What is the time frame in which this temple was built? So it was initiated in 7th century by this particular general named Lakkana Danadesa. However, it was completed by the end of 15th century by the contribution of various other kings. What are the key features? The key features are that it is surrounded by 3 gopurams, right? The various other structures associated with this temple are sanctum sanctorium. Then there are 3 antechambers, a pillared hall, and open pillared hall. And most important thing is that Krishna Dev Raya also contributed to the development of this temple in the context of the central pillared hall and gateway tower was built by Krishna Dev Rai. However, Krishna Dev Rai was not the person who initiated the development of this temple. He later on contributed to the development of this particular temple. Moving on, in the past, in 2020, there was a question with reference to Chaunsat Yogini temple. Where is it located? Is located in Madhya Pradesh. Okay. So based on the similar information, we have framed one practice MCQ for you with respect to Virupaksha temple. Consider the following statements. First one, it was commissioned by Vijayanagara ruler Krishna Dev Rai. So what did we just read? It was not commissioned by Krishna Dev Rai, although Krishna Dev Rai later on contributed to the development of this particular temple, right? Because he built pillared hall in that particular temple complex, but it was not commissioned by this particular king. It was commissioned by Dev Raya, right? Dev Rai. It sits on the bank of river Kaveri, right? No, obviously we have just read that this particular river is Tungabhadra river, right? Then third is with respect to its style and composition. Vesara style of temple architecture has been used in the construction of this particular temple. So all the statements are incorrect, which gives answer as D, that is none. Moving on to the next news for the day, we have taken it from the Indian Express page, that is page number 15. And what does the news read? What are AI agents and how are these different from LLMs? What are LLMs? Large language models. And now what are the AI agents? In the recent time, there was news, if you have been following, that ChatGPT has again come up with a new model, that is ChatGPT 4o, right? So this ChatGPT 4o can be called as an AI agent. Now what is the context of this news? Context is that various kind of emerging technologies and nomenclature, for example like large language models and AI agent, are in news, and UPSC keeps framing questions from these aspects, right? Now let us understand what are AI agents, right? And then what is the difference between AI agent and large language model, right? And then what we will discuss, what are the potential uses, and then can there be any challenges, and based on it will formulate one MCQ. What are AI agents? These agents are sophisticated AI systems, right? For example, what is the difference between your phone assistant Siri and ChatGPT and ChatGPT 4o? There are going to be two basic differences, right? The first one being that Siri will not be able to remember the previous instructions that were given to Siri. However, ChatGPT 4.0 would remember the contexts, right? The second point of difference between these two language models is that while Siri can work only on audio, you'll pass a command that hey Siri, do this. Hey Siri, set up an alarm for 5 a.m. right? These large language models work on audio input, video input, photo input, so on and forth. So even if you feed ChatGPT 4.0 a photograph of, let us say, Chandni Chowk, it will analyze that particular photograph and give you details that yes, this appears to be a photograph of Chandni Chowk, right? So this is going to be the key difference between an AI agent and a large language model, right? What are going to be the potential uses of AI agents? It can be used because they are not just providing you information, they are capable of providing you customized information, right? They are capable of providing you customized information as per your needs and demands, right? So what can be the potential uses? It can be used for customer service, it can work as your personalized tutor and healthcare assistant. And what are going to be the obvious risks, right? So first one being privacy and security, and the second one being that because it remembers what you are feeding that particular model, so again the model itself kind of starts creating biases towards you, and it gives you responds in a manner for the information based on your own intellect and biases, right? So these are the kind of threats and risks which are associated with these models. So based on our particular understanding of AI agents, let us try to solve this practice MCQ. Which among the below statements best describes AI agents? Large language models that can solely work on text based inputs and outputs. No, we just understood that these AI agents work on the input of maybe text, photograph, even music, voice as an input. Yes, so statement is incorrect. A software program that can only respond to predefined command. No, this is basically a definition of a software program, not a definition of AI agent. C. Sophisticated AI systems that can engage in real-time multimodal interactions with humans. Yes, this appears to be a comprehensive definition and based on our understanding of the topic. So C, let us read D as well. A large database that stores information for later retrieval. No, this is not the case with AI agents. So most likely option is answer C. Right. Moving on to the last topic for the day. The news appeared on page number 3 of Business Line newspaper, and it reads that finance minister is now the final authority for grading the central public sector enterprises. In this context, let us have a brief understanding of what are CPSEs, and then we'll solve an MCQ based on the information. What is the context? The process for upgrading or downgrading of the categories of CPSEs to higher or lower has been given to finance minister. So you must have all heard terms like Maharatna, Mini Ratna, Navratna, so on and forth, right? So these are the various categories with respect to the public sector enterprise. What is the meaning of public sector enterprise? The public sector enterprise is the one in which more than 50% of the shares are owned by the government. Some of the examples of public sector enterprises are Bharat Heavy Electricals Limited, Bharat Earth Movers Limited, right? Bharat Electronics Limited, right? Coal India Limited, so on and forth, right? So as of now, the process was that the upgradation of or the downgradation of these public sector enterprises, the power was with some other authority. We will see who was having the particular power with respect to nomenclature and grading of these PSUs. And as of now, the government has simplified the process for gradation, and the power has been shifted to the finance minister, right? So what are the key details with respect to this? So CPSEs are categorized in two ways. First one being category A, B, C, D, right? And the second one being Maharatna, Navratna, Mini Ratna and Mini Ratna 2. As of now in India, the data available with us, there are 71 CPSEs with A tag, category A, 68 PSEs with category B, 71, 68, 38 with category C, and only 5 with category D that are with the government. And along with it, the second criteria of classification is that they are also called as 4 categories of Ratnas, right? For example, Maharatna, there are 11 CPSEs with the tag of Maharatna. Then there are 12 CPSEs with the tag of Navratna, and 1 and 2 tag with the Mini Ratna 1 with 51 CPSEs and Mini Ratna 2 with 10 CPSEs. the various standards that are being used by the government for classification of these PSCs into Maharatna, Miniratna and Navratna status have been provided in the notes for your perusal. Now let us come back to the news on which the context on which the news was framed. So the previously the power of upgradation or downgradation, for example, a Mini Ratna 1 category, there are for example 58 CPSCs. One of the PSUs is trying to upgrade to Navratna status, right? So what is the process of upgradation or the downgradation from one category to other? So the power was vested with the Cabinet Secretariat and Public Enterprise Service Board, right? So the approval of Cabinet Secretariat was essential. The power was vested with Cabinet Secretariat. But now the power has been left with Public Enterprise Service Board along with the Finance Minister for gradation of PSCs. On what parameters is this gradation done? The parameters on which these kind of gradation, upgradation or downgradation of PSCs is done is in the context of various indicators like the performance of PSU, what kind of money it is able to generate, right? The indicators can be qualitative parameters or quantitative parameters, right? Quantitative parameters can be, for example, what is the net sale of this particular PSU, and one of the quantitative parameter can be to what extent it is important for nation, right? Or how much jobs this particular PSU is generating, right? So these are going to be the parameters, and based on the performance of these parameters, these PSUs are judged and categorized. And now this power, which earlier vested with the Cabinet Secretariat, has been transferred to the Finance Minister. Based on our understanding, in the past there have been questions with respect to banking in India, and especially in reference to the governance of public sector banks. On the same lines, there can be a question with respect to public sector enterprises. Let us try to solve this question. With reference to governance of central public sector enterprises, consider the following statements. All categorized CPSCs should come to Department of Public Enterprise for upgradation of their schedule. Okay, yes, this statement appears to be correct, that this Department of Public Enterprise is the authority with respect to upgradation or downgradation of their schedule, right? Upgradation of schedule are done based on quantitative parameters only. So no, this statement is incorrect, because there are other parameters like quantitative and qualitative as well, right? For example, one of the qualitative framework is that to what extent it is important for our country, right? So how many of the statements, which of the statement is correct? Only one is correct. However, 2 is incorrect because there are other parameters as well, right? So the correct answer becomes A, that is 1 only. With this, we conclude our session for today. If you have liked this video, kindly share it with your friends, right? Till we meet next time. Have a good evening.